Tenemos que lanzar el LinkedIn Live y el YouTube. Buenas tardes, un placer estar con todos aquí. La verdad es que muchas gracias por siempre apoyar Women4Cyber. Hoy tenemos una CybHerTalk muy especial, gracias a ZScaler. Ahora Blanca nos dirá unas palabras. Y bueno, solo daros la bienvenida, agradeceros vuestro tiempo y que esperemos que este rato que vamos a compartir juntos sea de inspiración, porque tenemos el privilegio de tener una persona que tiene una carrera muy inspiradora y que está solamente 3 días en España y va a compartir este rato con nosotros aquí en este espacio. Y bueno, Blanca, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias. En español, ¿no?
Sí, porque
Muy
luego
bien.
ya...
Buenas tardes a todos, soy Blanca Galletero, soy vicepresidenta de Partnerships, Alianzas y Canal en ZScaler para Europa, Middle East y África. Soy española y vivo en Madrid. Entonces hoy me tocaba jugar en casa y claro, no podía perder la oportunidad. Es un placer estar aquí con todos vosotros. Muchísimas gracias por venir y dedicarnos vuestro tiempo, porque tiempo es la única cosa, es la cosa más preciada que yo creo que tenemos, ya que el tiempo que pasa ya no vuelve. Así que muchas gracias por darnos este regalo y compartir este momento. Estoy convencida de que va a ser una experiencia inspiradora. Tenemos a nuestra presidenta ejecutiva, Kavitha Mariappan, que ahora veréis es una fuerza de la naturaleza, es tremenda la carrera que ha tenido, es súper inspiradora. Y fijaros que aquí estamos hablando de Women4Cyber y nosotros nos identificamos, ¿vale?, como una empresa de plataforma de conectividad empresarial, que además somos muy, muy buenos haciendo ciberseguridad, ¿vale? Entonces, encantada de conoceros a todos. Espero que esta sea la primera de muchas. Y sin más dilación, le doy paso a Kavitha Mariappan. Por favor, please, can you join us on the stage, Kavitha?
Great. Muchas gracias, Blanca. Pues la verdad es que siempre un placer trabajar con nuestras empresas colaboradoras. Women4Cyber, aparte de las asociadas que tenemos 2 figuras clave, que son las empresas colaboradoras, las entidades colaboradoras y nuestros partners estratégicos, que tienen distintas funciones, pero todos es apoyar para atraer y desarrollar el talento femenino y todo el talento disponible al mundo de la ciberseguridad y la tecnología. Así que esperamos que con esta parte de visibilizar carreras como la de Kavitha podamos aprender y tener distintas motivaciones para nosotros también levantar la mano, tomar el riesgo y atrevernos a hacer grandes cosas, que es lo que queremos desde Women4Cyber apoyar para esto. Y bueno, sin más dilación, let's introduce Kavitha to all of you. Kavitha is, well, as Blanca said, is the Executive Vice President for Customer Experience in ZScaler, and she has a wonderful career. She's been working hard and taking a lot of risk, changing countries, companies, and career paths to be here with us. And as you can see, she's a wonderful person that has the time to make this space to share with us her experience. And that's what we are done with generosity, to have these persons to share with us. So I don't want to take more time. We want to hear you, Kavitha. So please just let us know, how do you think your career path and the decisions you have made had led you to where you are now?
First, I wanted to thank all of you. I know you have so many places to be and so many things to do, and you've chosen to spend the time here with us, so thank you so much. I also wanted to thank you and your board for this initiative. It takes a lot of courage to build an organization like this, because it's different, it's difficult, but it's very necessary, as we talked about it at lunch. And as much as we talk about diversity, giving space to talk about it is very important. And I think it's a wonderful initiative, and I think this is probably one of the best, most interesting times to be thinking about cyber and to be thinking about how we're going to build cyber talent. Hi, Raquel. And how we are going to build a global workforce that is cyber literate, And to do that, we need people from everywhere. Diversity of thought, diversity of, ethnicity, diversity of skills. And so Women4Cyber is a very noble initiative. In November, I can count the dates. November 29 this year will be 30 years since I joined the workforce. As an engineer, and it's been, when you look back at your career, I always think about life and say, when you look back at your journey, what will you remember? And I feel very fortunate to look back and to be sitting here today, because if you could have told me 30 years ago, I would be sitting here in a room full of women in technology in Madrid, I probably wouldn't have thought this would have happened. So what a journey it has been for all of you in this. So let me tell you a little bit about my career story. I obviously, I have an engineering background. I grew up in Australia, for Indian ethnicity. My parents, and I actually was born in Malaysia. So this is a story of immigration, right? This is a story of immigration, a story of change, a story of transformation. We immigrated from Malaysia when I was a young child to Australia, and learned everything in English, learned to live in a very different country, a very different culture. My father is in the medical field. My mother's a nurse. And so engineering and tech was not at all what we thought of. But my parents grew up, and we grew up very, we were quite modest. We didn't have much financially, but my parents really believed in the value of education. And that was the biggest game changer for us. And my parents went on to do PhDs and all of that. But education was what gave us a seat at the table in our new country that we came to, and we learned to adapt and adjust. And so you can imagine, I love that. I love that we can do this.
Yes.
And so when we think about, the whole journey, I was always a maths and science student, and that was what was pushed at home, and I took a natural affinity to it. I think at the age of 9 or 10, I used to have my own, remember, I don't have a lot of toys. We didn't have a lot of money, but I used to build my own laboratory in my bedroom with the things that I had, pieces of glass for microscopes, and I used to build all of those things. And so the early, interest in building and tinkering was there. And then learning to take a seat, learning to speak differently. We talked about this at lunch today, about how culturally sometimes we don't speak up, and learning to speak in a room of people that didn't look like you, right? It was very difficult because it was very culturally coded to not speak a lot. Only speak when you have to. Don't make your point unless you have to, right? So there was a very cultural wiring in my upbringing. And when I, left high school, I went to university. I chose to be an engineer. My father was not happy because most Indian fathers want their children to become doctors. I said no. I said this was exactly what I told my father, because I said, I watch you come home. Both of you come home from the hospital every day and you are not dressed nice. You smell like formaldehyde. I can still smell the formaldehyde. I said, I want to dress nicely and I want to work in a big office building. This was my goal. My father was like, yes, but engineering, you're going to climb poles. This is not a job for a girl. That was the very first thing. The same father that told me you can do anything.
Yes.
Said, this is not a job for the girl. I said, okay, no problem. I'm an electrical engineer. I just got an offer from the Royal Australian Air Force as a signals officer for intelligence. Maybe I'll join the Air Force. And he said, no, do the engineering job. Don't join the military as an officer. So that was the beginning of my career. So no was a big thing. No happened a lot in that journey. And I started engineering among 362 boys. There were 9 girls. All 9 girls except 1 girl were children of immigrants. Romanians, Vietnamese, all of us that come to this country for a better life, for a different life. And what a journey that was. Because, 30 years plus the years in university and masters and everything, being in a room of people that don't look like you. This time around, it was all men, boys who became men later. And entering the workforce as a young female engineer at a time in the 90s where people didn't think we were engineers. I remember, and I was a engineer in the field. So I was a solutions architect, a systems engineer. I would go build systems at a time that, it wasn't all software. There was a lot of hardware. So I used to pick up, my Spark station in my suitcase wheeled, my toolkit. I would get on a plane and immigration would not let me in. And they'd be like, what is this? What do you care? What are you? And if I would explain to them, I'm an engineer, and they would say, what is that? You are not an engineer, right? This was the no's were big. One of my early career jobs, I remember I was a site engineer looking at switching technology, switching out a lot of Alcatel switches to Ericsson switches in country Australia, a lot of old buildings. And I remember my first time when I went, I had a hard hat and I went to inspect, and the guy goes, a very country area in Australia. They said, who are you? I said, I'm the engineer. They said, no, you're not. And then they put the ladder up and they said, all right, show us you're an engineer. So I climbed the ladder. I said, can we work now? Right? So we did that. But there were no female bathrooms. I mean, it was a very different time. So as much as we think about the fact that there's, we still have a huge gap, I think we've made so much progress. So these became themes in my career, themes of change, themes of taking things on that were unconventional, because why not? Because I didn't think of myself as a girl or a young woman. I thought of myself as a technologist, and I wanted to solve these problems. And the more I did that, the more I realized that the market responded to me. Opportunities opened up because I was the crazy one. Anything crazy, I'll do it. Do you have a passport? Can you go to London and install the system? Sure, no problem, right? And I know all the guys were like, why are we sending the girl to do the boy's job, right? And I had one career moment, and I'm giving you a long story because I want to give you the preamble of like what risk-taking in the picture looks like. I remember building a system outside of Oxford in Aylesbury with another guy. This guy was like 2 years older than me, so he thought he was like super senior, right? And I was being mansplained the whole time. This whole trip for 2 weeks, we were installing system. Now, this was a time where voltage did not auto-sense. So the chassis that we built, we had to switch because it was an American system that we were building in Europe. We had to switch the voltage. We had one line card that was built. We were going to demo this in London. We drove to Heathrow. This guy came out of customs, handed us this precious card. We drove back to the head end. I installed the card. I didn't flip the voltage. I burnt the whole thing. And the entire NOC looked at me. And I remember there was the first time and the last time I cried at work. And I was like, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I am a girl and maybe I cannot do this. And maybe this is going to be too difficult. And I think they all looked at me like, what are we going to do now? Because we don't have, the show is in 48 hours. So I called, I asked for favors. I had another card flown to Tel Aviv that they built and they overnighted. And then flew it to Heathrow. We picked it up, I installed it, and I never looked back. But these are moments where if a guy had done this, a young man would never have thought that his gender was the reason for his failure. His stupidity, like my stupidity, it had nothing to do with the fact that I'm a girl, right? But I learned very early on that attention to detail is important. And the second thing is that I will be scrutinized more than the man next to me. What I do, I have to do it infinitely better. And that became the theme of how I did what I did. I'm very grateful. It's been a great journey. But, and that was the beginning. I started traveling. I was living, I lived in Tokyo for 2 years, built a ton of systems. I was actually the engineer that installed the first internet system over cable in China. Believe it or not, it was a girl that did it. It was a young woman in China, in Japan, in Korea, in Taiwan, not a man. So that became the genesis of everything. I went back to Australia and had this opportunity where they said, hey, we're building this. So I worked for Philips at that time, Philips Electronics, a Dutch company, which is a great company. Let me tell you, 30 years ago, that company knew how to develop young graduates. That company, like Siemens is another company like that. These big, companies that have been around for a while, they know how to develop talent. And they gave opportunities. But I was an anomaly. I was not a business graduate, and I was not a guy. And this was a Dutch company. But there was an opportunity. They were building a center of innovation in the Silicon Valley, every engineer's dream. Mm-hmm. And they said, we're picking 8 people around the world and 7 business marketing graduates. and you are the only engineer and the first engineer we're going to pick and the first woman in this program. Would you like to go to America for 4 years?
Sure, for sure.
I said, sign me up. So it was pretty scary. I remember leaving the airport and I told my parents, I said, "We'll come back in 4 years." My father tells me now, he goes, "I knew you were never coming back."
Never coming.
And that was 25 and a half years ago, right? But now my parents live 5 minutes from me. I moved them to America instead. But, and that was the beginning of an incredible journey. Very difficult. I make it sound like easy and glamorous. I was completely not educated in America. America, the heart of the Silicon Valley, everybody was coming out of Ivy League. It was just the height of innovation. Competition was rife. Cost of living, you had to put lotteries in to get apartments because everybody was moving. So if you think about it, HP had just started. The roads were called Cisco Way, HP Way. There was no Google. There was no Meta. You know, I mean, all these traditional companies, but they were just around the corner. And it was not a beautiful city. It was a man-made city of technology, but it was a city and a place between San Jose to San Francisco where technology dreams come true. And just like Hollywood, the Silicon Valley is for engineers and technologists. Let me tell you, it is where anything is possible. If you have an idea, somebody believes in you. And growing up in Australia, we were very risk averse. You know, I think like nobody wanted to take risks and like fund companies and do those types of things. But here, if you had an idea, 3 guys in a garage, somebody was going to give you a little bit of money. And it made you test things out. It made you go build things. It made you try new things. And it made you believe in yourself. So even the kids who go to school or live there, they have a very different mindset. They have a mindset that you can, anything is possible. People think that is American arrogance. True. A lot of America is that way. But there's something special about this part of the country where it is really about igniting dreams. So I went to work for Cisco for 11 years. I ran go-to-market product for the service provider product line. It was close to $1 billion in revenue at that time. Built that business. And then I left to go, the company was like 75,000 people. It was, you know, big enough. Then it was time to go scale. I realized my magic, what I love to do was build. I'm a builder, right? And I had done engineering. I moved into product management. I'd done engineering management. And at that time, a lot of people, like good people at Cisco were getting invited to join this interesting startup that had just gone public in San Francisco. That was very cool. So all of us South Bay people wanted to go up and be in San Francisco. And it was a company called Riverbed. And $3 billion in ARR. I joined them to build their first software business unit. Acquired 3 companies, a firewall company in Germany, a company in Cambridge in the UK that was the biggest of the acquisitions, and a company in New Zealand. We integrated all of those, and I was to build the first software business unit. Now, this is a hardware company where deal sizes are huge. Sellers know how to sell hardware. Now you're asking me to go build low margin software in a company where people don't have this culture, right? And it was retraining the whole company and building a go-to-market to and not antagonizing, but learning how to use all these other skills. And the job I took was, my title was Director of Product Marketing. Now, as an engineer, the last thing I would ever think about is to become a marketer. Because you look at marketing and you go, that's colors, that's party planning, that's pretty things. I'm not doing that. The title was only a title. The job was to build the entire go-to-market function and to hire all the sales leadership. I was a little bit like weirded out by the title, but I was like, this sounds amazing if this works out. And I learned something about myself. I was arrogant as a technologist. I didn't look at the other side and say that there are soft skills that I can learn. Talking to press, building messaging, figuring out how to take technology and package it up for sale. Because at the end of the day, that's what sells the technology. Enabling sellers, enabling partners and channels, creating value propositions, business value propositions. I realized this was a skill set I was missing and it's something I needed to round out. So I spent some time there. And then I met an entrepreneur who called me every weekend. He was an angel investor that had sold several companies for several $1 billion to Apple and Google. And he said, you came to America to live the startup dream, but you haven't worked in a startup yet. And I was afraid because I had 3 young children at that time, and security and stability was very important to be in a big company. You know, and you're in a foreign country, you needed that. But I said, after 6 months, I said, all right, let's do it. That was the scariest experience of my career, and probably the pivot point, the next pivot point in my career. I went to a company of 62 people and ran all the go-to-market and sales, and packaged the company out for sale because they were doing all kinds of things. And these were my marketing skills. So I went as a CMO, but I had a bigger mandate. Packaged the company, pivoted the roadmap, and sold the company to EMC. And then I went on to do 2 other startups that had acquisitions. And then I was tired of startups. Startups are exhausting because you don't know if you're going to make payroll. You're trying to raise funding. You're trying to do all kinds of things. And I decided I would maybe go solo and work on a venture fund when Zscaler had just gone public. And Jay Chaudhry, the CEO, my boss, called and he said, I talked to a lot of people and your name keeps coming up. I think we should meet. So I said, okay, let's meet. And I went into the office. And if you have met Jay, if you have been to a presentation with Zscaler, Zenith Live, or Google and watch a presentation, Jay grew up in a small village in the Himalayas with no running water and he had no shoes. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, and one of the most humble people that I have ever worked with. And he had this spirit of building something new. He says, no, the world is changing. The world is changing. It is going to be mobile. It's going to be, all workloads are going to be in the cloud, and nobody is building security for this world. And the company had just gone public. So a lot of infrastructure wasn't there, but enough to know that this product has some legs. 10 minutes into my 30-minute meeting with him, we were whiteboarding for 2 hours on the architecture. And I was like, okay, this is very interesting. So he said, so I have an idea. I want to build an office of transformation. Come and join me, join my executive leadership team. I'm like, what kind of job is that? I don't know what that is. And this could completely derail my career, or this could be the best thing I could have done, right? And I met him every Sunday at the Starbucks for a couple of months. And I signed an NDA and I sat through 26 customer EBCs. I watched customers. I said, I want to see what your customers have because I don't know what we're building here. I see your vision. I have some ideas. So I listened to the customers. I watched how the leadership team was leaning into the customers. Zscaler is the kind of company as big as we are. We roll up our sleeves. We are with our customers. We listen. We like our technology, and we want to lean in. I watched. I thought, wow, the pain points are real. I can do something here. So then we sat down with McKinsey and we designed what would be. And then he said, here, write your own job description, write your own press release, and we'll announce you at the earnings in October. So that was the journey of taking risks. And I've been with the company. This October will be 6 years. But I wanted to paint that picture to say where you start, where you end, or what the journey is, and where will I go next, or what would that journey will be like. I'm not sure. But making it mean something and creating impact and taking risks that are measured for your family, of course, right? Because we can't just do crazy things because we have, many of us have a lot of responsibilities. But having that mindset, I think, helps sometimes open amazing doors and create amazing opportunities and create amazing experiences. And you get to work with great people all along the journey. That's a long answer to your question.
No, that's right, Kavitha. Really, we need to understand that the whole journey to really know your leadership skills and how you took your risk. And then you won where you wanted to be. And that is something that we work a lot in Women4Cyber, that we try that our associates have this mentorship and have this inspirational talk. So when you see that other people have succeed, that they come from very humble beginnings, and then that you can really stick to it, work hard, but then you can play hard, as they say, because taking this risk, changing companies, going to startups,
Studying
studying
every single thing so you are good. Remember, you are scrutinized more than anybody else. So you better be good at what you do. And technical skills were the thing,
Yeah,
you know,
and
to
you
really
have to
hone
be-
in on.
to keep updating all the
Yeah,
time.
right?
That's what I like. I love that about technology, that you always have to be in your learning zone.
Yeah.
You never can be in your comfort zone, because in the comfort zone, nothing's happened.
Right.
Everything happens in the learning zone. So when we see stories like yours and your journey and how you really took those risks and say, okay, I do it, and then realize that you have to work harder than anyone to be there. That is something that sometimes we think is, oh, so tiring. Always we need to work harder. But if you want to be there, if you want to change the world for everyone, we need to do it now. The goal, though, is not to be extraordinary. There is this ad that I love that say, I just want to be one of many. I don't want to be extraordinary person, extraordinary woman, extraordinary, just 3 women out of 300? Oh my
Nice.
goodness, that's
But you know, I think that's motivation is important, right? We don't go about things saying, I want to be extraordinary. It's not about you. It's about, there's an interesting quote. It says, at the end, we are all stories in the end. So make it count. At the end of the day, when we're no longer here, we're just a legacy and a story, right? So what was the journey that you lived, and what will people remember you by? And it's not about how extraordinary you are. It's about, first and foremost, your life counts, right? What are you doing in your life to create impact and have a meaningful life? 2, what are you doing for others? What are you doing for the industry or that you're in?
generosity.
Yeah,
Yes, generosity.
right.
That's
And I
it.
think that's what matters, because at the end of the day, that's the story that will be written. You will write for yourself, or you will, you know, it will be written for you, you know.
Yeah, that's part of it. That is why we would like to showcase journeys like yours, so our community can learn and can be inspired and say, okay, if we work hard, if we take risk, we can move forward, and we can also help others to be on the path, and that we are not exceptions. That is why we are very proud that now in Spain we have 31% women working in the technology, well, in cybersecurity sector, 1/3 in the technology, but it's
Yeah.
not different now. But when we started here, we were only 11%.
Right.
So there is a long way that we have been going through, but we have more to do, because we are half of the population. As we were talking about, we are no minority. But in technology, in cybersecurity, we are right now rare people. So we need to make these type of stories available, so you can inspire and say, okay, I can do that. I love what Kavitha is doing. So let's go to and let's study, let's take risk and go forward and move forward, because I would like you also to share with us in all this journey, everything that you have seen, all the work you have done, and also with 3 kids, that is also something that is very time demanding. What best practices do you think, or what worked for you that you can share with the community?
Oh, yeah. Look, I think one of the things I learned was, I say this a lot. I tell my team this: do not sugarcoat. You better know your stuff, right? Because if we unpack and you don't know your stuff, then you are not putting the work in. Number one. So it was honing the skills all the time, and it's actually very tiresome, right? But that was my core best practice. My core best practice was that, making sure I knew what I was doing, and when I changed jobs or grew or evolved into different, not just types of jobs, but sectors, right? Like, so if you're in storage, now you've never worked in storage, you better learn storage. You got a learning curve to hit. If you are in, enterprise IT, you have a learning curve. You're in cybersecurity, you have a learning curve, right? And so I think that was one of the best practices to do that. 2 is, and it's harder to do earlier in your career, but it becomes clearer later in your career, is to be authentic. To be authentic about who you are and your goals and desires, and to present them authentically. I am authentically a human being. You will not find me trying to be anything other than that. Am I tough? Yeah. Am I, do I drive for results? Yes. But making sure that you are genuine as a person and authentic, because it's too exhausting to be something you're not, right? I think those best practices helped, continue to help me, like when I reframe, even as an executive, it's a lonely road up there. I was the first female executive at Zscaler as a public company. I was the only one for the longest time. It's, the industry is looking at you, not just your company. Where cybersecurity is a very, very robust space. And so the best practices are make sure you don't take your foot off the pedal. You better know and better ensure that your ethics, your morals, these are all in check. The third thing is I learned to juggle, infinitely juggle. And I look back now and I figure out, and I look at this, sweet baby there, and I figure out days when I used to do that while being on a call, while trying to work, and the three of them are sick, and there's no family there to help you. You learn to be kind to yourself, because our expectations as women, I think, we put a lot of expectations. We have to wear so many hats, right? And so if my house was dirty that day because I had to deal with this, I had to just let it go, because I'm also a little bit obsessive compulsive. I want to do it all, right? And so you have to, because you will exhaust yourself. Second thing I learned later as my kids went to school is to build a network of mothers. That helped me tremendously, because I was not the mother that was not working at that time who could go on school field trips or all of those things. I had to work, but I had a strong network of mothers that knew and were there for my kids. And these people would help me pick up and do things. And it was a very nurturing community of women who, little things like, okay, what do I do? My daughter has this. Where do I buy this? Oh, she has a performance. I don't know where to go. So it helped remove a lot of anxiety for me. And believe it or not, now our kids are all in university, and this mothers group is still strong, right? And so I think building a community, those were some best practices. Ask for help where it matters. Asking for help is not a weakness. Being vulnerable is not a weakness. And I think sometimes we feel like if we show our vulnerability, we are weak. And we don't want to talk about being a woman. I spent a good part of my career not wanting to talk about diversity, not wanting to talk about, and I have a double, I'm a person of color and I'm a woman. It's too much diversity. I didn't want to be different. I just wanted to fit in the room. But I got to a certain stage in my career where I realized that people are coming to me asking me, how did it happen? How did you do it? How can you give me guidance? And so I realized that the story matters, and that now people are listening, and I should talk about diversity. I should talk about vulnerability, and I should talk about the things that we are not all perfect. We have life that happens to us. And so those are best practices. Like those help me self-heal, and ramp back up quicker by having some of those.
Wow. I'm hearing you, Kavitha, and I just if it was I that I've been talking about that, because that's something that we nurture a lot. They say, be kind to yourself. Sometimes we try to be so perfect, and sometimes we don't know ourselves.
Yes.
So we don't know how to be authentic, because we don't really understand what we want and where we want to be and how we want to be presented. So that is something that is very important for us also we have here young engineers. That is so important for us to really know ourselves and also have the right to change. It doesn't matter. You can think something today and tomorrow you can think other thing. It doesn't matter, but you need to be clear about that.
Right.
So you can
be intentional.
Authentic.
Be intentional, right?
Exactly. And sometimes we don't I always say, treat yourself as if you were your best friends.
Right. My kids, though,
Yeah.
they treat themselves too much like they're their best friends, you know. So I have a different problem. But honestly, let me tell you, it depends on what stage in your career you are at. Be hungry. You need to be hungry at any stage and have passion for what you do. Sometimes I look at my kids in their early 20s and late teens, I'm like, what happened? Life is easy, you know. I need to make you hungry, you know. So,
and that is why that is a conversation we many times have. Why in your women minority, but they were also immigrants.
Yeah.
So they were hungry to be different, to go for a strong career and say, I want to do that because I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And sometimes here, when we talk about this, well, Nora knows this very well because she has a magazine for children and adolescents. So she's always talking about this, how you attract young children, and girls to the STEAM careers. That is very difficult because here we are not hungry in the Western Europe. And that is why there are more engineers in India, in the Dominican Republic. Actually, in my country now is 0.5% industrial engineer. When I started back then, we were about 15%. And now we're 50%. And here is a drama. It's like every year is like less women deciding to study engineer or to go to the technological.
Why?
And because they're not hungry.
I think
that's what part of it. That's part of it.
Part of it. I think you cannot be what you cannot see.
Exactly.
So if we don't see more women in these positions at higher levels or in every level, then there's no aspiration for that, right? So I think just hunger is not going to come from something you cannot see. Boys see everything. They see doctors, they see engineers, they see lawyers, they see football players. Girls, have to model what, so we need to see more. We need to see more people in these positions staying in the workforce. Now, I have a very prescriptive position on why we want equality and equity. It's not a nice to have. When 50% of the population is not having the same type of jobs, 50% of the population does not have economic buying power. We are not giving women the ability to contribute to the economy of the country, to the global economy. That is a bigger problem than it's not a nice to have. We must have equal economic buying power. It's about pure economics, right? And women are better consumers than men.
That's right.
Statistics, the data shows when you improve, the equity of women in the workforce, it's more profitable for businesses, right? And so it's just something to think about, being prescriptive as younger women are entering the workforce. 3 stages, right? You have younger women doing STEM, entering the workforce, especially as we talk about cyber. Can we make sure these jobs are jobs that they want to do?
Yes.
Right? Then there's the mid-career where life happens, where you're in mid-management, your career is happening, you're having a family, or, there's a lot of things. Then we forget about leadership. The third leg of the stool is now you are in leadership and that you need different kinds of skills. You need different kinds of sponsors and allies to get you into executive leadership in the boardroom. And life is still happening. Many of us at this stage in life are caring for parents who are aging, right? That burden still falls onto daughters mostly. Yeah. It's a generalization. And so how are we supporting women in all these different phases? Coming back to cybersecurity and IT, there's such a robust, space. There's so many things one can do. There's no one linear path. As I describe my career, I always say, it's not a step ladder, it's a jungle gym.
Yes.
Right? Don't think about, because when you do the jungle, methodical, not crazy, because crazy jungle gym is nothing. But if you, make strategic moves, they pay off, right? They pay off. And then you have to start thinking about the space and why it matters. Because if we start thinking about AI now, there are more jobs for AI ethicists, lawyers, for intellectual property law, specifically with AI and linguistics. Because especially as we do natural language processing across different languages, right? We are going to need more and more linguists. Who would have thought that would be a career in cyber? Right? When I was at Databricks, we literally trained, I think in like 18 months, 30,000 data engineers. We couldn't find enough. We worked with an organization called Galvanize. I tell this story because we went and picked mathematics graduates, graphics designers, graduates, because they were wired to do data engineering. They were not computer scientists. Physics, math, and graphics design. Like we're talking UX designers, not like, like real front and back end designers. They were wired, and so the path to get into some of these jobs. And now if you think about AI and machine learning and what that means to cybersecurity, there are so many opportunities at every level. And I think I hate this. Anybody that wants to just be a manager and manage 2 people or 3 people, that's not ambition, people. That's not ambition. I know it's a nice thing to say I became a manager. Do you really want to do performance reviews for 4 people and approve vacation time? Would you rather go do something more incredible with your career, right? So as young people think about it, when you're presented with opportunities, or even mid-career, I turned down a director job at Cisco to continue to run the product line. And I took a lateral path because at that time, they wouldn't let you transfer to promote. Because if you let people transfer to promote, people will leave to promote, right? Yes. To take on a job to run all of Cisco's corporate development engineering. It was the most incredible shift that I did because I was responsible for all the technology behind every company we acquired. And all of a sudden, I had a bigger team. I had people who were VPs reporting to me, and I was a senior manager. I had CTOs from acquisitions reporting to me. Again, my skill sets. I had to show all these people why they needed to listen to me because they were not going to listen to me. I had to create sense of purpose. Had to create a way for me to lead them, not manage them. It's a very different skill set, right? So I think there are ways to think about this, and in a similar reframing, I think cybersecurity is like that as a landscape.
And also some conversations we always have, because we have a lot of ambassadors, as we told you, allies who want really, because we need to make the change with everyone, so with 100% of the population. So what are the best practices you have seen also for men to become allies and also ambassadors, and make them to understand that we are all going to be more rich and profitable if we tap the whole talent we have available?
Of course. When we talk about diversity, we cannot talk about segregation. So when we start talking a lot about women, we start leaving other groups of people out, other minority groups, right? That's one. So we have to be very mindful when we talk about this. Allies are very important. Like I said, I've never had a female boss in 30 years. Sad. But there was just nobody at that level, right? That's one. Second thing is, every opportunity I had was because of a male mentor, ally, or champion or sponsor, that me coming to the United States, me jumping into startups, me being given a blank piece of paper to say, write your own job description, and we're going to share it with Wall Street. I mean, these are really cool opportunities, but they came from men. They were there. Allies who believed in me, who supported me. Of course, I worked hard, but they, gave me an opportunity, right? I tell a sidebar, cute story. The gentleman that was the general manager that threw my hat in the ring for me to move to the US when I was in my 20s. When my oldest daughter went to university, he saw on Facebook, he's a lot older now, he saw on Facebook, he lives in Atlanta, and he messaged me and he said, "May I have Karina's email address?" And I said, "Sure." And he wrote her a letter about your mother's American journey and dream. I wish you had met her when she was in her 20s. And how it was a really beautiful story. But this was a male ally. I mean, I still have that email that he wrote, and that how stories are written, right, about the journey, and how he was wishing her well. And my daughter was very inspired. But the thing is, these are people. There are real men out there, people that are wonderful, that you can lean on, that will inspire you, that will give you an opportunity. Because men and women have to work together, and sometimes we report to each other. And if we don't show the other side what the challenges are, they can't read our minds. Sometimes you have to be prescriptive. You have to say, hey, that is actually that's not okay. One thing I always tell people, when you're in a meeting of men and women, naturally the man looks at the woman and says, do you mind taking notes? Put down your pen. I get in a meeting and I'll be like, John, would you mind taking notes?
Exactly.
Everyone looks at the meeting and goes, something just changed here.
Yes.
Right?
That's the turning point.
Right. But because it's a bias. But if you don't tell them, hey, when I'm or like when I'm someone on my team, right? When someone on my team is the only woman in the room and you asked her to take notes, what do you think the rest of the room looked at her? She became an admin in that minute. It didn't matter if she's an engineer or anything. We just minimized her role to a note taker. Not that note taking is bad, right? But why, from a bias perspective? So, but once you point it out, people go, oh, shoot, I didn't realize that. Other little thing I've always said is when you do events like this and you have women usually in marketing organizing these events, make sure that you let them take a seat at the table. They're not coordinators. They are part. If we're talking about diversity, we better pull up a chair and let them sit. So when I do executive dinners, usually the field marketing manager is like, I'll sit outside. I'm like, no, you sit right here next to the CIO of this company because you are working directly with them. Because if we don't make those type of changes as leaders, this change doesn't happen.
It's not going to
right?
happen.
And once men see that, they're like, hey, this was a good thing. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think this was something I should be doing. So
well,
I think,
actually, we can be the whole afternoon talking with Kavitha experience because it's been very inspiring. But we are going to take some questions from the audience. Maybe first here, Blanca, so we can have some questions from the audience here, and then we change to the to our audience in the streaming. So here, Nora has a question. And then our young ladies, for sure, will have some questions.
I love that.
Thank you a lot for being here and sharing such an honest way of your journey. I just wanted to ask you, if looking back, you will do one change, what would that change be and why? Thank you.
That's a great question. One change, I think I would have gone to a startup earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Instead of staying in a bigger company, I think that was my immigrant insecurity of like needing to have everything right. And when is enough, because I think I would have, not that I have any regrets, but I think like I could have thrown my hat in the ring. And so I think I'm glad there were people that were pushing me. And then I came to a point I was using my young kids as an excuse. No, I can't go because, my youngest is only 2.5 years old. 2.5 is good enough. Let's do this. What's the worst thing? And that was the thing. The worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work out and you can find another job.
You can go back.
But that fear was there as an immigrant, it took me a long time to rewire my thinking. But yes, I think that would have been one. If I had to say one other thing is maybe spend more time with my kids.
Oh.
Right now, most of them have left the house. But yeah.
So right there, Giselle.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's been amazing to hear. I have a question. It is, how do you keep yourself like motivated, like at the start of the journey? Because I'm starting my journey right now, and one of the things that I've found when I'm doing my thing is that it comes to a point where I feel like I'm stuck and I don't know how to move on. And so how do you use to keep yourself pushing yourself to move on? Like where do you find that kind of strength?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you for asking. Let me answer that in two parts. For me, there was a lot of learning. I think every human being is different. And I think when you manage teams, you start to realize your style may not be 100% the style of everyone on your team. So they don't get motivated. They don't get incentivized in the same way. That was my, you learned that through management. I also learned that through my kids when they were later in teens, where I'm like, what is wrong? Why are you not motivated? Why are you not, and they're like, Mom, we are not like you. You have like energy or passion that is very different to me. Like my middle daughter will say that, right? So it's this real, and this is my child. This is like not somebody else, it's my child. Same environment, DNA, but is wired differently. And then you start to think, wow, everybody is wired differently. So I think you have to find what makes you happy, right? What matters to you, especially when you're hitting a brick wall. Reframing perspectives is like you're starting your career and, in a certain stage in your career. You're not motivated because you're probably not being challenged. You're not doing work that excites you. You're probably not being given feedback in the way you like to hear feedback. Some people don't like feedback that's like rah-rah. Other people love it. It's rocket fuel. Some people are just naturally extroverted, happy. Other people are not. So you kind of have to figure out like what is your internal wiring, and it can evolve, right? It can evolve, but usually I think like who you are. And I think go back to basics. First principles are this: life is short. We have one life to live, and live it we must. So we have to make it meaningful and not waste time in places that are not rewarding us financially, professionally, personally, and emotionally, right? And so there comes a time where sometimes you're like, this, either I have to change. Sometimes it's just changing the environment. It could be changing a group or asking for a different project, whatever that might be. Change the variables and A/B test the variables and see if it works. If that doesn't work, and maybe that's not the right group or the right place. But you will find it, and you will find your stride, right? And you have to believe that you will find your stride.
Yes, you will. So Vanessa is right there.
Well, thank you so much for here. Thank you, Kavitha. Thank you, Edu. Thank you, Women4Cyber. For like every time we come here, the events are amazing. The inspiration that we get from seeing people that are in leadership positions, that we can get to share. But I at this point, I have two questions for you. The first one is like, what do you think are the best practices for us women to help each other? Like that you have seen that we can replicate and learn from. That from one side. And on a second note, I would like to ask you about female leadership. I mean, we are women, we are physically different, maybe not as human beings with men, but we have different ways of, we're wired different.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the main differences in terms of leadership, and how can we embrace the fact that we're women and that we are leaders at the same time? I mean, I don't know if you can pinpoint maybe two aspects that can make us women and leaders at the same time that are effective and authentic. Thank you.
Great questions.
Wow.
Great question. So let me answer this. There is a very famous saying that says, there is a special place in hell for women who don't help women.
That's right.
It's a very
That's
true
for us.
It is. And I say that because women for generations competed with each other. You know why? Because there were so few of us and there was only one job. And so we never helped each other. My generation of women did not help each other in the way I see millennial women and Gen Z women really help each other. My generation of women are now leaders and now starting like to lean in and help each other, right? In a very different way. But that was there because it was primal. We were competing for the same thing. So we were going to kill each other to get the one thing that we wanted. But that has changed. So best practices are one thing. If you get asked, somebody approaches you for a job and you don't want that job, don't let that opportunity go. Share it with your network of women. That's one, right? Bring more women into projects. I have this stupid thing that people do. I hate this. If somebody is not assigned to the project, it doesn't mean you can't work on it. Nonsense. As long as you do your job, you can do anything good. So take more work on. Do cross-functional projects, right? So when you do stuff like that, bring people in, give people the opportunity. Second thing is give people visibility, whether it's in the room or on the Zoom, right? Give visibility always to the woman, the other woman in your group or your team, rather share the love, right? Because these are best practices to elevate each other, right? Share the differences of who we are. I would say that I do this for every job. Like, anytime somebody approaches, I'm like, oh, no, I'm not looking to make a change, but here are 5 people in my network that you should give a call, reach out. The other thing is support each other, because very few people in the room know what the other woman is going through. You know better, and sometimes being that ally, if there is a young mother who has sick children at home and she has to run home and she has to deal with this, but she still has to meet deadlines, you know better because you are living this life. I have a joke with our exec team, my peers, and they're like, hey, what did you do this weekend? I'm like, I don't know. Made dentist appointments for my 16-year-old, 15-year-old. I went grocery shopping. I did this, I did that, because they all have wives. I don't have a wife. So they look at me like, oh, you did that. I played golf. That's awesome. Right? Because I don't have a wife.
That's a big difference.
But they're like, oh, okay. But it's the reality that, you understand more what another woman is going through. And then it's a generalization. There are great men who share a lot of the workload. And let me tell you, this one is an important thing. People don't want to talk about it. Women don't succeed often because they do not have a supportive partner at home. This is really the burden of house care and childcare and elder care always falls onto women. COVID was the time the Band-Aid got ripped because all these men had to be stuck in the house with us and watch what was going on. And I think a lot of men, I saw it in my team of young fathers and fathers who are like, oh my God, this is really exhausting.
No.
Right? This is really exhausting. It's like this infinite loop of every day. There's no change. You go back to the same thing, right? To them, it was like no varied stimuli. But you know what? I think it's really important to pull up that chair, give that person that reprieve and that opportunity. So that was your best practices question. Your second question was on leadership. What is different about us? Yes.
If it's different.
I believe 100% is different. I think you will see that more and more CIOs and CISOs that are getting appointed are women. More and more. Still a long way to go. Why? Because we bring certain skill sets to the table. IT leadership, security leadership especially, it requires, you need to be multi-threaded. You need to be a crisis handler. You need to figure out how to make IT and security work together. You have to be collaborative. You have to have incredible project management skills. Let me tell you how good my project management skills are when I was raising 3 children, trying to fix things in my house, do my job, all of you are doing it. I'm not unique. All of you are doing it. Do you know how plan vacations, dental appointments, doctor's appointments, people get sick, pediatrician appointment, take care of your own health, people's haircuts, while you're doing some of the most incredible, important work in the industry. You are incredible project managers, jugglers, and we're seeing more and more women getting hired into very senior leadership positions in IT security because of not just their domain expertise, but because they have this skill set that is so necessary in IT.
Well, just 1 minute to finish in the streaming. So thank you very much to our audience for being there. The streaming one. So maybe, Blanca, we can take one question out of the streaming audience.
I think she had one question. If we
yes, but maybe we can do that after, because
sure.
we are going to shut up the streaming. Yeah.
So one of the questions that has been shared in the LinkedIn broadcasting was, Kavitha, with the life that you are describing to us, how do you stay up to date with technological trends and advances in your field?
I read. I have news feeds. I read. It's very important. I have a lot of, in the morning, I look at Wall Street Journal CIO. I look at the Financial Times. I look at, publications that I care about, and I need it in sound bites. I'm an executive that is time poor. I don't have enough time. I'm on the go a lot. And I also have to augment that to the different countries and markets that I'm in. If I'm coming to Spain and I'm doing a press interview, I need to understand the local market, right? So I think it's the reading and making sure that I'm keeping up. And it's hard because it's so noisy out there. There's so much going on, but you have to make time.
Any tool that you would recommend?
I think it depends on your space. There are so many wonderful publications out there, like online publications that bring digest a lot of content. Some great writers out there. And I think you find, like, based on your background and the work that you're doing, what's more interesting. If you're in risk, or if you're in security, or if you're in compliance, or you're in core IT, like what you care about, there are plenty out there, right?
Thank you.
No, thanks.
Great. So I think we are going to say bye to our LinkedIn Live and YouTube. Thank you for sharing this time with us. Y los esperamos para la próxima CybHerTalk, que no tenemos en agosto, será el 4 de septiembre, miércoles 4 de septiembre. Muchas gracias por haber compartido este rato con nosotros. Gracias.
Awesome.
Y seguimos aquí with the last question. Yes.